Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn 1 bringing you another deck profile, but this one is a little bit different because this is the deck I actually brought to a online webcam tournament recently. It was hosted by, to get this up here, Shadowverse Evolve Master. It's a website you guys should check out. I'll put the information below. It provides some resources for the community. It is run by, I believe, BMA. Which has been in the Shadowverse community for a long time as a content creator and is now doing content here in Shadowverse Evolve, as well as playing the game, obviously. I entered their tournament there and actually entered with Midrange Combo Forest is what I'm calling it, because I feel it's a little bit different than the normal Midrange Forest list, but I kind of explain once I get into it, so we'll just jump right into it from here. All right, so this is the list. The list is a little bit different, only slightly, because entering this tournament, it was an open deck format, which means you can't surprise people with anything, something like that. But this deck list became 41 cards because I wasn't sure what to cut to add Mark of the Six, which I think the card itself, Mark of the Six, can be good or bad. I just haven't found a real good reason to like take a slot up with this card. But because the list or the tournament was an open deck list tournament, I just put this in there as a one of to, cause people to maybe misplay. If they see me open with some play points, suddenly they think they have lethal and they don't have lethal or are afraid of it, and so they can't really push for lethal or do a different game plan, essentially. It was in there as a one of. It never came up the entire day. I probably would never play this Mark of the Six again. I think the card itself, unless you have a really good game plan for it, I think only maybe in the mirror match is kind of good if you play into another King Elephant, or sometimes if you play into Control Haven. This could come up where if they try to end the game with an Aegis swing and they think they're fine, they kind of tap out for the Aegis and doing other things, and then they swing in with the Aegis, and then suddenly you didn't take the 10 plus damage they thought you were going to take. Suddenly they just kind of lose the game because they thought the game was going to be over, so they kind of overextended and wasted their play points, so they could no longer actually interact with your King Elephant. You block that damage, they go to your turn, King Elephant, end that matchup that way. A lot of the times is how the game would play out if you play Mark of the Six. The deck still does very well against Havencraft, particularly Control. It can do very well. One of the games I lost against Havencraft Control, I only lost because of time restraint reasons, and partially my fault because I should have been playing faster, obviously. But when you're stuck in this perpetual control matchup and you have to grind out the game really, really hard, every second matters. Unfortunately, the rulings for the tournament is whoever has more health at the end of the game is decided the winner at time and after you go to turns. My opponent was 3 life ahead of me. If I top deck King Elephant that turn after they tapped out, I would have won the game just by swinging with the King Elephant. Even if it only did 4 damage, it was still good to go. Unfortunate luck there on my part. But other than that, this deck is crazy good. I think it's kind of slept on, honestly, at this point. After I actually got to play with it more and spoke with Presha, who helped me test this deck a lot too, kind of came to the same conclusions he had, and he put me on the spell Elf Song, which is a really, really powerful combo piece you should be playing if you're playing Spinaria. I think this plus Spinaria is insane. Elf Song plus Spinaria just kind of blows people out, and they don't expect a certain amount of damage on turn 5. So some of the cool strengths about this list is that you have a very explosive turn 5 turn as long as you have Spinaria in your hand and you saw an Elven Princess Mage. Otherwise, you kind of play this slower control game. You can kind of build a wide board and push damage that way until you get to the point where King Elephant can close you the game. But a lot of the time, King Elephant isn't necessarily how you win a lot of your games. It's usually through your turn 5 play with Spinaria. If you set up a board that's really hard for your opponent to deal with, only certain matchups can really handle it, and mostly that matchup is Control Haven, and then kind of Dragon as well, because they have a pretty decent board wipe on their turn 5/6. But a lot of times, if your opponent can't really deal with a really powerful wide board on turn 5 or 6, they kind of just lose the game. But yeah, I'll get into it and talk a little bit more about how certain things play out in this list. So Elfchild May is in here. This is a card I love and hate. It kind of enables some combos and can clear up some stuff when you need to bounce things back to your hand with Ancient Elf. If I could take this card out of the list, I 100% would, but there's issues where a card I would play in this slot even would be maybe Bellringer Angel or Angelic Snipe, but the thing is, I really need the access to the Evo slots, so I can't really play like a one of Bellringer in my Evo deck at all. And then I need some way to actually interact with my board against aggro matchups early on. This is one of those ways that can do it. And the one thing about playing Angelic Snipe that also kind of fulfills the same role, one thing it doesn't do well is that it can act as a combo enabler when you have like Nature's Guidance or something like that, or you need to bounce something off the board. So Elfchild May is still like really good in that sense. I mean, if you've been playing with the card, you kind of know like the strengths and weaknesses of having to play this card in the deck. It's kind of just like almost a necessary evil that's really good sometimes, and then super garbage late game. Like once you draw more than one Elfchild May, sometimes it's like, this is very painful. Next card, Sakuna, Brave and Small. This card is insane in this deck. It's like, this is the card that wins you most of your games on turn 5 because of like the setup you have. We played 2 of the Evo because this card is just that good. If I could play 3 of the Evo and found room for it, I 100% would, because I don't want this card to ever be a dead draw. But you know, later in the game, it still comes as a dead draw occasionally. It's a 1-drop, so it can be enabled as a combo enabler if you need to play it and bounce it, play it again, and stuff like that to get up to the combo. This card, 99% of the time you play this card, it's going to come down as a 5/5 when you Evo. The only time it doesn't usually is if you know you're in a matchup where you got to pressure them early, like Control Haven, and you think that you can get away with it. You can like turn 1 Sakuna Evo, swing for 2, going second if your opponent like played something on turn 1 and like didn't engage a Bellringer or something like that. That's one of the ways you can abuse it, and then bounce it back to your hand and save it for later to get in for that 5+ damage later on in the game. This card's amazing. This is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck and in Forest in general, because of like building up to the combo 5 is a lot of fun, and figuring out the right paths to get there is really fun. And then it's kind of like a card your opponent just kind of can't always know you have or not, and you don't really know like the damage output your opponent has. Whereas like King Elephant, you always know it's going to come down for like 6 or 7 damage on turn 6. This is kind of like the surprise factor for the deck. Like I said earlier, Mark of the Six, this is a 41 card deck. I think if you build this deck, I think you just cut this card. It's not as good as you might think. I think Homecoming is a better card to replace this if you want to stay at a 41 card deck. But Homecoming is just better than this with how the deck works. Cool card though. You have some niche utility here and there for it. I just think it's not worth the slot, honestly. Nature's Guidance, obviously one of the huge bounce combo enablers here. You need to play 3 of. It's also a spell, so you can find it when your Spinaria comes down, which is pretty big. I mean, if you've been playing Forest for a while, you know you have to just play 3 immediately. Same thing with Harvest Festival here. You have to play this card. It's just like part of your engine of like getting hand size up all the time and keeping up with your opponent. Luckily, this deck does, if you don't ever see a Harvest Festival or can get like the engine going, Spinaria hitting 2 on the turns 5 and 6, and whenever you play it in the mid to late game, replenishes your hand enough to keep it up enough to actually compete with your opponent and make your King Elephant still threatening, especially when you get to turns 9 and 10 to like kind of close out games that went too long for you. You still have enough cards in hand, usually because of Spinaria's fanfare effect that adds to your hand, to be able to like push damage with King Elephant and keep it as threatening as it is. Otherwise, Harvest Festival is so important. You have to draw it early on. Worst case scenario is either you don't draw it, obviously, but the other like worst case scenario is you draw into Starry Elf. You just play this on 3 to get your Harvest Festival, because if you don't have the Harvest Festival early on, you're gonna like lose resources to deal with boards that normally would be easy to deal with if you had like the card draw and so forth, and the combo ability, because playing Harvest Festival down still adds to your combo, which is really important. Having all these 1-cost combo enablers is really good. We played 2 of Spring Green Protection. This card is the best worst card in the deck, in my opinion, other than Elfchild May. Times where you play this, you want to collect Wisp up into your EX zone because you need them for your turn 5 play. So like double bouncing this early to get 2 Wisp is really good. The combo 3 happens all the time very easily, so you can always give something +1/+1 and then gain another Wisp essentially. Also, you can still make the same turn 2 play of turn 1 Spring Green Protection, turn 2 Ancient Elf, bounce to hand, move Wisp up, Evo Ancient Elf to get a 5/5 on turn 2. If you know your opponent can't deal with it and you high roll into the Ancient Elf plus Spring Green Protection hand, you can do that play. Sometimes it's not worth it though, because a lot of decks do have ways on turns 3 and 4 to kind of like remove the Ancient Elf. But if you can kind of guarantee the swing for 5 on turn 3, I think it's really good then, because a lot of times before that they requires them to like use 2 spells essentially to remove your Ancient Elf, because you should be leaving it standing is a 5/5 because it's really hard for them to interact with, so you can get the guaranteed 5 damage in those games where you know you can get that off. It feels really, really good. Ancient Elf is an enabler plus a big body on the board. This card's super good. We play 2 of the Evo. This comes down always as a 5/5 essentially. There are some matchups like into aggro matchups where you'll have to just like play this out as a 4/4 just to clear board, provide a wall so your opponent doesn't go for your life total too often. One of the big issues with aggro is that sometimes you have to draw into 1 or 2 pieces like early on, and if you don't get those couple pieces to like punish aggro or make it protect your life total, essentially you can get high rolled out of the game and like just lose to a random storm damage here and there. Though I don't think aggro as a deck is that popular right now, because it kind of just loses to like almost every deck, because most decks should be playing Angelic Snipe or some anti-aggro tools essentially, or decks are just way too powerful at the mid game that it blows out aggro. So even though they're getting in for the damage, if they're not winning like before turn 5 or 6, they're probably not winning the game. Crystalia Lily is back. This card is love and hate card here. Sometimes you high roll and just get the Tia to hand, which is insane. Those games you feel super amazing, but we still need answers to certain cards on our opponent's board, and we play 2 of the Evo as well to do a 2/2 line to bottom deck their cards. Some cards are just like impossible for you to deal with, or you just need to get them out of the way, some ward out of the way. For example, like against Demon Punk, if they use the effect to give it Bane, playing this to bottom deck, it means they just took 2 damage for no reason because they're not going to get the 2 damage back, and it's not going to protect their total or their board, their life total, that is. Lily is a really good card right now because there are big threats coming to the board, especially into like the Dragon matchup. Having this card Abyss bottom deck something that you normally couldn't handle early, because Dragon gets the high roll and get an extra, they get to go first and they get an extra play point, is pretty annoying to deal with. So being able to just drop this down at any point to just say goodbye to something is really, really good. Tia's here. We want to create big boards. It also combos very well on the turn where we do play Spinaria. So this is another like enabler for Spinaria. Essentially, once we play down a Spinaria, we create these big wide boards in the like turn 4 and stuff. And even earlier, you can push out a 4/4 very, very early with Tia here when you have Wisp to handle it, but you don't really do that too often. This is mostly just after your Spinaria turn. If your board starts losing pressure to your opponent, you can just kind of lightly combo and slam Tia on the board to build a 4/4, Evo it, make it a 5/5, so forth. Card is super good. You want to see it, but you don't want to see it too often because you do have a lot of dig in this deck, unironically. So only seeing 1 copy of this is really good because you do combo it a lot by bouncing it back to your hand and playing again to get another 4/4 token, things like that. Marvelous Sunday, this is how we get health back. It's also an enabler because it does bounce cards off of our field, so we can bounce Harvest Festivals, Spring Protection, things like that, or Tia as well. If we want to save a card after playing it, there are some times where you'll like play King Elephant, then play this to bounce King Elephant back to your hand, so you can play it again next turn or for the like turn 9 or 10 play, which is pretty funny when that does happen. Marvelous Sunday is just a really, really good card for the bouncing plus the healing, and it's a 2-drop. Like, you can't really complain about this card at all. Elf Song, this is a card I feel like people are sleeping on so much right now. Pressure put me on this card, which at first I saw this card before. I thought about it a little bit, didn't really put too much thought into it. I was like, card seems okay. I don't know if I really want to play this card. I did a bunch of playtesting against Pressure, and he talked about Elf Song, and I talked to him about like my thoughts on it, and he said kind of like, no, you need to be playing this card. It's actually pretty insane. And afterwards, I kind of thought about it a lot. I was like, you know what? Pressure is right. This card actually is insane because it does combo with Spinaria, and Spinaria can find you this too on the turn it comes into play to make sure that you can just like pop off during your turn 5 play and present this board that's like really hard for a lot of decks to really handle. Whenever you play this card, you're always going to be playing it as the combo 3. You should never be playing it as just like your first turn or something like that just to get a fairy token. It's a wasted slot then at that point, and you shouldn't be playing this card then. Card's insane. Once you try it out, you'll love it and never want to go back. All right, Elven Princess Mage here, which we play 2 of the Evo here. The big thing is we get 2 Fairy Wisps that cost 0. The big thing isn't that they're 1/1s. It's the big thing is that they cost 0 to bump up our combo count. So we want to see this usually on turns 3 or 4 is when you kind of want to play this out and evo it immediately. We don't really care if this lives. If it lives cross that one turn, that's actually insane for you, and you 100% won the game if they don't have an answer to your board immediately or for the damage coming up. This is just kind of like the card that's like, hey, here's a 4/4. We can run it into something if needed on turns 3 or 4 just to clear up the board. But the big thing here is we get the Wisp. The Wisp are the most important part about this deck, because without the Wisp, we can't just pop offs on turn 5 and later as freely as we want. Starry Elf here is like the unfortunate one of we have to play in this list. You don't have to if you want to cut some of your consistency. But the thing is, if you've played Forest enough, you understand that if you don't see your Harvest Festival, you just want to blow your brains out every time. This is your 4th copy of Harvest Festival, essentially. Sometimes you just have to play this out and get the amulet. What's cool too is that you generally don't shuffle your deck too often with Forest, so this can force you to shuffle your deck. So like if your opening hand was like 3 King Elephants and then the Spinaria, obviously you have to ditch that hand. It's just horrible. But suddenly a lot of your win condition is gone. Starry Elf, at least when it does come down, reshuffles the deck, so you have a chance to draw those cards that you bought in deck, though that's not really something you really care about at all. Those games are like probably 1 in like every 100 or like 1,000, so they don't come up too often. But Starry Elf as the 4th copy of Harvest Festival is the really important part here. Homecoming, this is a card that people have slept on, mostly because combo 5 is not necessarily that easy to get and consistent, but this deck makes it so combo 5 is just a no-brainer. You get it whenever you want as long as you have Wisp to do it. This is how you out a lot of matchups like Control Haven. Same thing with like Abyss. If they go wide with their like a control version of Abyss, you can Homecoming away their board, especially if they're the Angel control variant. They don't necessarily attack your hand as much, which means you're going to be easily combo 5 with this, and you just say goodbye to their board. It's a good answer to any big bodies that get cheated out early by Abyss or Dragon, because even not using the combo 5, you can still bottom deck or top. They get to choose, obviously, but either bottom deck or top deck one of their big guys, and they basically lost the turn if they only play that one huge creature for 3 play points, which is just huge. It also can be comboed very well on the same turn you do play your Spinaria. It's just that good of a card. Honestly, I might want to bump up Homecoming to a 2 of, just because it's that good in certain matchups like the Control Haven matchup. If you're playing against Control Haven a lot, maybe you play this as a 2 of, but it as a 1 of came up like enough times that I've been happy with it, and every time I needed it, I've had it because it's a 1 of and you get to dig for it whenever you want, which is kind of nice too with the Spinaria effect. So far it's been good as a 1 of. I could totally see this as an easy 2 of also. Cards just insanely good right now. Cassiopeia, you've played this last set. This is how we deal with wide boards. Cassiopeia is kind of like our turn 5 play if we don't see Spinaria, because usually on 5 at that point we have a couple cards in our EX zone. We usually have a full hand, which means whatever board they have out there, unless it has like aura, their board is gone. We just play this down and we get like 8+ damage to their board wherever, and divide it however we'd like to. Cassiopeia is such a huge like tempo swing on turn 5 if their board is getting out of control. Card just too good not to be playing. Spinaria, this is kind of the whole reason the deck works so well. It's more of a combo of cards, really. It's usually Spinaria plus Elf Song plus Sakuna are like the big reasons to be playing this deck. The combination of those 3 cards is insane. It's kind of like this is kind of your win condition too, and for some horrible reason this card has ward as well, which means a lot of times you can just like, if you need to, you can engage this after playing it and protect yourself, but honestly you shouldn't a lot of the times, depending on what you're playing into, just because you just want the damage next turn to like end the game immediately a lot of the time. So when this card comes in play, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then from among them you pick 1 Forestcraft Follower and 1 Forest Spell as well, and add it to your hand. That's why we have Elf Song, which can be grabbed. We have Mark of the Six for this tournament we can grab. We have Homecoming, which we can grab. And I believe I did say Elf Song, as well as Nature's Guidance. All huge, great spells to be like just getting for quote unquote free off of Spinaria. But the big thing here is on combo 3, Spinaria recovers you 3 play points, which is huge on turn 5 to enable your combo 5 on turn 5 essentially. Finally, we have King Elephant. This is kind of like our other win condition essentially. It's a it provides pressure our opponent always has to consider. There are times where you just like turn 6, slam this to the board, and just get a huge swing of damage in, and you kind of win the game from there. Late game into control matchups, you got to play it out to the point where you make it so they can't answer this. Then you slam it down for the 1 of Evo to just like kind of do like 15 face damage and call it a day that way. Otherwise, once again, Spinaria is kind of like our main win condition. So let me kind of talk a little bit about how the Spinaria combo works. So your main idea of the deck is that you're going to play somewhat of a normal game plan up until turn 5. Obviously, seeing Elfchild May, Harvest Festival early on is very important, along with like some kind of enabler like Nature's Guidance or Marvelous Sunday. On turns 3 or 4, you need to be hopefully find Elven Princess Mage here, or have already bounced Spring Green Protection twice, because going into turn 5, you need 2 Wisps. That's all you need to pop off. On turn 5, you'll be pushing up 2 Wisps to up the combo count, play Spinaria with your 5 play points, recover 3 play points, and hopefully you can get something insane off of your top check 4. One of the best things to see if you don't have them both in your hand already is Elf Song plus Sakuna on turn 5 with Evo points. With this deck, you do want to go second a lot of the time. If you don't go second, then you can't get the really big pop-off turn with the deck. You still can be a really, really powerful deck, like even on turn 6 and 5. But going second with an Evo point is insane for this deck, because we play this down, we get 2 cards, 1 to 2 cards usually off of the Fanfare effect, recover our 3 play points. At that point, you push the combo counter up to... to 4 here. We just play down Sakuna, leaving 2 play points left to the board, and then we play Elf Song, which makes it 5 combo count. We're buffing our board +1/+1, and if we have room, we get a fairy token that gets +1/+1 as well. So our board is suddenly 2 Wisps that are 2/2s, Spinaria, which is going to be a 4/6, plus a 2/2 unevolved Sakuna, and then if you have it room from it, you have a 2/2 fairy as well. But the big thing is now with the Evo point, you get an Evo into your Sakuna, which is now a 6/6 with Storm. You swing in with 6 Storm damage and then kind of laugh at your opponent's face, as suddenly they did not expect to take that much damage. Anytime going into turn 5, if your opponent leaves you any cards on the board, like an Elven Princess Mage, it's you, and you have a Sakuna, you get a really, really pop off with the deck, and you just like push 10 to 11 damage on turn 5, which is usually a big enough swing to force them to start playing control. Otherwise, they have to, like, basically in the game next turn, you have this huge wide board built up now that they have to deal with, so they don't have an answer like Themis or something like that. They kind of lose the game a lot of the times. And then the fact that Elf Song is such a powerful card in comboing with Spinaria, making your Wisp token feel less, less bad, that it's a 1/1. Now it's at least a 2/2 that you got for essentially free, which is nice, which usually means they have to play a Jean or something to just kind of clear that board up, because you have a bunch of 2/2s on the board that you kind of got for free, essentially, just for playing the game. Usually after that turn, it's kind of like a GG's moment if they don't have a way to really deal with that huge wide board because of how much pressure it exerts to your opponent, and it forces them to have an answer. Sometimes if they do have an answer, they clear the board. They don't really have a way to protect themselves after, which means on turn 6, playing a King Elephant usually wins you the game at that point too, because they'll probably be down to like 6-7 health, and this is usually how you just be like, yeah, King Elephant, hit you for 7, shake my hand essentially. Deck is insane. It is super, super good. I hope to get some match videos of this deck out pretty soon. They did record my first game, which is on the Shadowverse Evolve Masters YouTube channel, I believe, but I did see part of it, and they had some technical difficulties when they were streaming the match, so I'm not sure if they're going to re-upload it individually or anything like that, but basically it turned into a slideshow at one point. That match is pretty interesting to watch though, so you should check it out if you're interested in this deck, because it shows you like the low roll of the deck dealing with Control Haven. That game, I basically saw 1 Harvest Festival all game and like no way to enable it, so I was kind of forced to crack it early for a draw, and just never drew into another Harvest Festival or a Starry Elf again, so I didn't get to have my engine going. But the turns I got Spinaria out helped build back up my hand enough that King Elephant and stuff, it was still relatively threatening, and I could still stay in the game. I played through 3 Marwyn Evos and 2 Aegis as well, and was still in a position by the end of that game where I think if the game went on for like 3 to 4 more turns, I'm pretty sure I won that game for the most part. Even though a lot of my quote unquote pressure on my opponent was just 4 wisp tokens that I kept pushing up over and over again in that game, where I just kept building a bunch of wisp tokens and being like, here, deal with all these 1/1s that's just going to constantly swing into you until until like I run you out of resources, and then I could start playing my things and kind of win with King Elephant. But yeah, that's the deck itself. Really try it out. I think this deck is being slept on a bit. The person that did win the event, I don't have their name on hand here, but they were playing a version of this deck without Elf Song, which was almost the same exact list I was testing with Pressure in the beginning. But by the end of it, I think not playing Elf Song is a mistake, because that card is just too insane for this deck, especially on turn 5. You get this huge power spike all of a sudden if they're not used to seeing this deck played out that way, and realizing after playing Elven Princess Mage that they need to prepare for a turn 5 like insane board. People will just lose. This deck just like auto wins into Rune a lot of the times, even though you don't expect it to, just because if like their turn 4 is they play their Lashena, and you go, don't really care, it's a 2/4, what's that going to do to me? You go to your turn 5 and you're just like, yeah, here's this board now that you have to deal with. You don't have a lot of really good wide board clears for your deck, and even if you do clear a few things, you're still going to eat 6 or more damage with the Sakuna Evo, which is insane, and you still have this board that has to be answered a lot of the times. Deck is insanely good. Please try it out if you like Forest. I don't play Forest very often. I'm an avid Forest hater, and if I'm seeing the praise of this deck, you know it has to be at least good enough to be winning events. But yeah, deck is a lot of fun. This deck has been one of the most fun decks I've been playing in Shadowverse as of recent, so please check it out. Let me know what you guys think of combo Forest, mid-range Forest, whatever. What have you done with Spinaria? Because I think Spinaria is like the key piece that kind of glues this entire deck together, essentially. I like the fact too that King Elephant is kind of like an inevitability too if the game goes too long. As long as you kept up on resources, King Elephant is just such a scary finisher that you still can like lose the game even if you're at like 15 health. So I think the deck has very few bad matchups into this meta, which is nice. It kind of just loses to like Control Haven a lot of the times, which is really rough, and you have to really outplay your opponent then. But outside of that, I think the deck has no really bad matchups, other than breaking yourself, which is a thing you accept with Forest. But yeah, let me know if you like this deck and all that stuff. Leave a comment below, like, comment, subscribe, all that. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining me on this great Shadowverse adventure, and hopefully we have more great videos and tournaments in the future to talk about. With that being said, we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.